Welcome to the Dish on Divorce. I'm Leanne Townsend.
And I'm Jennifer Barkin.
And today we're welcoming on the show our guest who is coming to us from Ohio in the United States. And her name is Dr. Renee Moodry. I always think of you as Dr. Renee, though. So sometimes I even forget your last name because I just know you really as Dr. Renee. So welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. This is such an honor, and congratulations on your wonderful show. So well deserved.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Now, the topic for today, I think, is a really interesting one, because we're going to be discussing energy and how it affects us, through the divorce process and healing. And I know, Dr. Renee, one of the things you had mentioned to me when we were chatting about you coming on the show was that you're dealing with a lot of people who are finding in their energy, it's like the wounded feminine energy is what you were talking about, and you're finding that both men and women are. That seems to be an issue that's going on in the world right now, and so. First off, I wonder if you could sort of explain maybe to listeners a little bit about your background, and then follow up with what is divine masculine energy, what is feminine energy, and do we have those, and how does that all relate?
Absolutely. It's a great question. And it is something that's becoming far more popular, right, in our discussions today, as many people are studying spirituality, even for their everyday life, very practical ways of applying this. So as a traditionally trained educational psychologist and also an intuitive specialist and guide, one of the things that I am doing in my work today is bridging the gap between science and spirituality, looking at the practical aspects of the spiritual realm and how to apply those in everyday life and how they help them in improving our relationships, our mental, emotional well-being, and particularly for children, because that's my love. I've been an educator for 25 years. So, that is really important. And I started to really study this aspect of energy when I became a mother, because I remember struggling with this, what I now know as hypermasculine, energy and behavior most of my life. But many of us women fall into that, not willfully, but kind of, just in the way that we go in our profession, as an academician and a scientist and a predominant, masculine world for the longest time. It's really easy to get lost amidst that energy and forget that we also have this beautiful feminine energy in us, because every day we're so used to be very competitive and, driven and goal oriented. And biologically, a lot of that is in us naturally too. It's not a figment of our imagination. It's not something we create just because we feel like it. Some of us are just hardwired. We know there's neurobiological reasons within our brains as well, that many women, I'm one, have a little bit more masculine brain in the way that it works from an energetic chemical perspective. So coupled with that, the natural biological components, and then also when we start getting into relationships with other people, they bring their own energy. So we each have our own masculine and feminine energy. A lot of people use the word divine masculine, divine feminine, and they use that sort of inappropriately. The divine is the union of the energy. It's the yin and the yang. It's when it's in balance. So when it's not in balance, it's masculine and feminine, right? We each have these characteristics to ourselves. The feminine is the very nurturing energy of ourselves, the creative energy. When you think of it, it's the mothering energy, even if you're not a mother or choosing not to be a mother in this lifetime. It's that kind of energy. It's just that one who nourishes, replenishes, knows how to love and give and those kinds of things. So the healthy feminine is one who can do that without expectations, without hurt. Well, I gave this to you, you gave nothing back. That would be getting into the wounded feminine. And the masculine energy is the one who is the protector, knows how to put up boundaries, sets goals, very action oriented, gets things done. And then we find that in the balance, it's really nice if we can be in the mindset of when and which those are appropriate and when, right? But sometimes we're not. And that's when the wounded energy has kind of come up. And so in the pandemic, what has happened is we've all become very emotionally depleted, socially starving. And the feminine energy strives for connection, relationality, right? Connection with other people. And so it's not surprising this is coming up for men and women, that at first we were very angry last year. The hyper masculine, the toxic masculine came out because people were losing their jobs against their will. They're being held in their homes. They're feeling like they don't have control over their bodies, their livelihood, things like that. Now we're tired. And now we're moving into that side of depression, right? And mental depletion. And that's where the wounded feminine tends to come out. And it comes out in a way that becomes sometimes a little bit covert manipulative, because it's like, well, how do I get things when I don't know how to do for myself? Sometimes they play the what's the word I'm looking for? Damsel in distress kind of thing to get people to come and save them. And there's a lot of this where I'm just going and doing things for myself and not for the collective anymore. And so we see a lot of this coming up, for men and women. So I hope that helps, because you can tell I'm really passionate about this topic, but it's really important.
No, definitely that helps. And I'm thinking, is tying it in with like the divorce context as well. I would think that the whole adversarial process and courts and things like that's masculine energy. And so I'm wondering how that plays out, with parties going through divorce, and whether whether women find it more challenging, maybe because it is such a predominantly masculine energy, although mediation would maybe be more, I don't know, you're the expert, but maybe that's more in the feminine energy. I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. Mediation would definitely be in the healthy feminine, right? Let's work through this. Let's talk through this. Let's nurture. Let's look at how we both can benefit, but also help, especially if there's children involved, right? This isn't about us. This is about the larger nurturing ecosystem of the children. And so, yeah, the healthy feminine would come in with that perspective. It's just when we start having to, where many people are feeling like things are being taken against their will. So I know a lot of women, and I know you guys are more experts in this than I am, but the women that I counsel, who are going through divorces, why did they stay so long? Why didn't they leave that relationship earlier? And why are they now in an entanglement where there's a lot of anger and resentment, where maybe earlier we could have left, right? But I did it as well. I stayed many years past my expiration date. And so a lot of that hyper masculine, that toxic masculine emerges in both people because they become very angry about feeling like, I'm rejected, or I wasn't brought into the honesty of discussion. Maybe there's a cheating partner. Maybe there's just, dishonest practices. This can lead to that masculine, very toxic masculine emerging. And then on the other side is for women and men. I know a lot of men who feel as though they don't get a fair shake in the system, and that, simply because they're men, they often don't get the full benefit. I know here in the state I live in, it's very different. It's very equal for men and women. And, shared parenting is really the way that the courts really want people to go. And so we see that a lot of people feel as though they're going to lose their children. That's the first thing, or they're not going to have access to their children the way they want to. And then the financial mechanism comes up, right? After we get through the relational fear of what might be lost, then the power comes in about, well, I've spent all of these years with someone. I feel that I'm entitled to this, or I have the right to it because I was part of that process in helping them in their creative years and helping them. And I did all these things, even in the back scenes, even if I wasn't a business partner. I feel that I'm a part of that. And so there's a lot of that woundedness that'll come up, that if their answer is no, you're not entitled to that, right? Which some, as you guys know, some partners just say, no, I'm not giving anything to this because I'm angry. The wounded feminine then turns around and becomes very manipulative, very covert. Conversations about other issues that maybe other people didn't know about, bringing up the dirty laundry, bringing things to court that probably, yes, they might have happened, but are they the best way to go about solving the problems at hand versus making everybody look like a really bad person? That can be really, really common with the energy. So I find that to be a little scary when that comes forward, because then it's going to get ugly, right? And it's going to get long. And for you guys as lawyers, I know that, yes, you're going to probably make more more money because you're going to be in this longer, but I know that's not what you want. You want them to solve their problems and to be able to come to a solution more healthfully. And so there's a lot of issues there.
So that's where some counseling or other professionals can be help, because if that frontal lobe, that amygdala is triggered, right, it's not going to end well. So you have to get into some sort of therapy to dig in deep. Why are you triggered, and how will you not be triggered?
Yeah, absolutely. And we know there's, 7 common emotional triggers that often are going to manifest when one feels in that fight or flight mode. And it could be anything, but the one for, could be rejection. It could be, feeling of being left out of information and finding things out. The partner who finds out about, secret bank accounts or, adulterous affairs, and what must that feel like inside for a person, a huge sense of loss, feeling of rejection, I'm not good enough. Or then the injustice is another emotional trigger I think is really common in the divorce separation process. I feel that this is unfair, and this is not right. And so, yeah, absolutely, to go then into whether traditional counseling or going into, a different type of healing modality that's really going to help you is really going to be important, because you're right, it does slow down that response reaction of that fight or flight mode, that reptilian brain that wants to kick in and protect you and assume everything is wrong right now. We must fight. And so bringing that energy into a divorce, I know that was me at first, was I'm going to fight, and no, this is not going to happen. Thankfully we settled down and we calmed down, and a couple months went by with, therapy and assistance, and we were able to come back to this part of ourselves, which is the emotion processor and the language component, and, the self-regulatory piece that said, okay, I can do this, and I'm not going to lose something. And even if I did lose something, I still have me, right? And I can get through this. So yeah, absolutely. That's a great point.
Who's going through divorce, be mindful of their energy and having a healthy energy, as they go through it.
Yeah, no, wonderful question. I think anytime, as a researcher in the field of emotions, you're never going to hear me say emotions are bad. All emotions have healthy components to them, and all of them can be very detrimental. Extreme excessive happiness over time that is not truthful can lead to a sense of depletion, right? This living up in toxic positivity, just as much as living too much way down in anger and irritability and sadness can lead to great depletion of our body, right? From a hormonal perspective and a biochemical perspective. So one of the first things in studying our energy is getting into awareness of how it feels within our bodies. And that's the part where many of us are so disconnected from. I know I was guilty. I was going the spiritual path for so long, and I was way up here, and I forgot that I lived down here on the earth, and my body was starting to reject me in a way. I wasn't taking care of it. Other things like that. So our body is the first line of defense with the communication system, or whether our intuition or whatever you want to call it. Sometimes it's just the somatic aspects of our body. We feel anger in certain parts of our body predominantly. So our lower back, or, here, sometimes we feel fear or constriction around our chest or in our heart chakras when we feel great sadness, right? So the energy really does tend to have very specific patterns. Stress shows up in certain ways, but then there's unique patterns to each human body as well. So I would say checking in with the body, really thinking about what feels tense, what doesn't feel so good. You might even have burning sensations in your skin. You might have tingling. You might have a lot of different things, but it's typically how stress would feel. So when our energy is out of balance, we're going to be feeling the stress modalities. We're going to be feeling those elements of that. So I would say check in with that first and foremost, and then realize, like, am I in conflict with myself? Irritability is a big one. When we are stepping out as women, when we're stepping out of our own energy and moving into that unnatural discontent, it's like being on a rowboat. I always use the analogy, both of you are sitting on a rowboat, both of your energies, and you have to do your part. If one person all of a sudden comes to the middle, it's like the boat just goes all the way to one side. And that's what happens in our energies. We're too far in the masculine, we're too far in the feminine. It's really important to let them be fluid and move back and forth.
Now, do we all have like a different point in our like I find, I've talked with you about this myself. Like I find my career, my job, it's a very masculine energy job, and I have to take charge and I have to argue on behalf of people. And then being a single mom, I'm running a household, and again, it's like masculine energy, and I'm a very girly girl. And I find I often, I can feel really out of whack at times because I feel like I'm living so much of my life, particularly these days, in like this masculine energy. But I'm wondering, like, for another woman who maybe falls somewhere different on the energy, like, I don't know where to, like, continuum. Yeah. Like whether, like, do we all fall at a different place, or do women just naturally, they should be more, not, I don't think the word should, but they're just naturally more, towards the feminine, men are naturally towards the masculine, and, or, in my case, am I just out of whack with where I should be on the continuum?
Oh, no, I love this question because actually I've been gearing up to write a really passionate piece of mine on androgyny in the energy. This is not in sexual orientation or anything. When I use the word androgyny, we often think of, inability to recognize or discern the gender, right, is what we usually think of when we think of androgynous. Androgynous models tend to be some of the highest paid in the world. Why? Because they're so, you can utilize them anywhere, right? And they often have very unique characteristics, and they can be made to look feminine or masculine or lacking thereof. And so the energies right now, we're kind of sitting in the middle. We're finding the intersection is more interesting, and that all of us are all over the map. All of us are everywhere, because again, we've come to this social understanding or knowing what feminine or masculine means, right? We all come in a body, and most of us, have a very specific gender biologically given to us, right? And that's not for all, because obviously we have androgynous and we have dual gender individuals, but we know that. But that doesn't have everything to do with our energy. Our energy exists within the body, but also within the environment. And so everything we're exposed to impacts our energy. So for you, Leanne, absolutely. And as a professor myself, which used to be very predominantly masculine and male, and now has shifted, thankfully, we can lose ourselves in that. But we do have to be in the masculine energy to survive in what we do. We cannot not do it, right? So absolutely. So that gives us even greater pause to have to remember in our self practices, in those daily things, that we have to remember to put those in that allow us to connect back to that. It can be something as simple as sitting with a cup of herbal tea and just putting on something really, really comfy. I love wearing really flowy clothes now, as I've embraced that divine feminine goddess energy, because often I found I wore pants most of my life. And then I'm like, when I wear a skirt, I feel really great. And so it can be something as silly as that, as easy as that. Or yes.
Spring with Jennifer.
Yes. Take me,
that'll get me my feminine energy.
Soon.
Yeah.
Soon.
Yeah. And for men as well, some men are more comfortable in their feminine than their masculine. It has nothing to do with sexual orientation or lack thereof. It just is. Sometimes, a lot of research is suggesting maybe it might be how they were raised, if they were predominantly with single mothers. We've not really seen a high correlation of that. Very masculine men are raised by single mothers all the time. But do they have a greater knowing of that feminine component of themselves? Yes. So yeah, everyone's all over the place. And the last thing I'll say in this, because you really triggered something for me to remember that's so important. Some women, though, are way more on the feminine side against their will. Meaning that, this is how we are, this is how we act, this is what we do. And they have very natural masculine tendencies to want to do other things. And when that masculine is suppressed or oppressed, let me say, right? Because again, sometimes people oppress it and say, no, we're not going to act like that or do those kinds of things. That can lead to a lot of pent up anger, which can show as rage later in some of our girls. And that can show up in self harm versus harming others. So eating disorders tend to be very common in people who are oppressed into that. And so when I'm thinking about like children going through divorces and through systems like that, how this energy plays out can play a huge role on what they see as acceptable, right? And how they see people solve problems, both for themselves and for other people. And if we want to teach children healthy conflict resolution, right? Because healthy conflict is necessary in a world in which there are humans. It's important that we really understand our own energies because kids really do pick up on that. Yeah, but no, that was a really wonderful question. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. This is such a interesting topic. I feel like we could use more time, but maybe we can have you back another time, or even on another topic, because I know there's so many topics I've chatted with you about over the few years that we've known each other. So thank you so much, Renee, for coming on the show.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you so much. It's been an honor, and I'd love to be back again. Thank you.
That'd be great. Thank you as well to our listeners for tuning in. I'm Leanne Townsend.
And I'm Jennifer Barkin.
We'll see you next time.
Bye.